You thought owning a home meant freedom, peace, a place to breathe without fear. But when the HOA told me I could not keep my dog, the very creature that saved my life, I knew this was not just about rules. This was about control. What they did next shook the entire neighborhood. And what I built in return, it became a symbol, a rebellion, a doggy paradise they would never forget. You always dreamed of a peaceful life. A modest home with a little yard, the sound of wind through the trees, and someone to share your days with. That someone turned out to be Max, your golden retriever with eyes that understood pain better than most people ever could. Max came into your life during your darkest days. After losing your father in a car crash and drifting through a period of unbearable loneliness, you adopted Max from a local shelter. You did not just save him, he saved you too. Every morning he would greet you with his tail thumping like a drum roll of joy. On long walks through the woods behind your old apartment, he stayed by your side like a shadow with a heartbeat. He had a sense, an unexplainable way of knowing when you needed comfort, even when you never said a word. So when you finally saved enough to move into your first home, a cozy 2-story house in a well-manicured suburban neighborhood, you believed things were looking up. You had plans: install a fence, maybe build a small deck, and of course, let Max enjoy the freedom of a backyard he never had. Your new home was part of a community governed by an HOA. You knew they had rules, but you were not worried. Max was a good dog, calm, gentle, loved by everyone who met him. What could possibly go wrong? You unpacked boxes, met a few neighbors, waved politely at the HOA president, Mrs. Klein, a woman with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Still, you felt hope. Max trotted around the lawn like a king finally returned to his kingdom. That yard was his new world. In those early days, life felt simple again. Little did you know, the quiet peace you had built was standing on a fault line, one that was about to crack wide open. It started with an envelope, plain white, slid under your door like a ghost in the night. No knock, no conversation, just that silent warning. You picked it up, thinking it was another welcome packet, or maybe a reminder about trash pickup schedules. But as your eyes scanned the page, your heart sank. Per Article 4, Section B of the HOA bylaws, pets deemed to be in violation of our breed or size limitations must be removed from the premises within 14 days. Your hands trembled. You read it again. Your dog, Max, was being targeted. The letter did not mention his name, but it did not have to. They listed his breed. They used vague language about neighborhood comfort and resident safety. Max was a golden retriever. Not a threat, not aggressive. He had never so much as growled at a stranger. You stood in your living room, the paper crumpling slightly in your grip as Max walked over and gently rested his head against your leg, sensing the tension. You looked down at him, and something inside you tightened. You were not going to give him up. You reached out to the HOA by phone that same day. After 3 failed attempts, someone finally answered. A clipped voice, cold, robotic. "The rule is the rule," she said. "We have received anonymous complaints about a large dog in the neighborhood. If it exceeds the 50-pound limit, it must be removed. The community voted on this policy last year." Anonymous complaints? Max had not barked once since you moved in. He never ran loose. He did not dig, jump, or cause any damage. This was not about behavior. It was about control. You asked for exceptions. You explained Max was a therapy animal. You offered medical records. The woman on the line did not care. "You have 12 days now," she added before hanging up. You sat down on the floor beside Max, the letter clutched in your hand. He nudged your face with his nose, trying to comfort you. You had never felt more angry or more determined. This was not just about a dog anymore. This was about something deeper. The right to feel safe and free in your own home. And you were not about to let it go without a fight. You thought the letter was the end of it. You thought maybe they were bluffing, that it would pass. But it did not. Within days, things started to shift. You came home one afternoon to find a bright orange violation notice taped to your front door. Unapproved pet on premises, $250 fine issued. No warning, no hearing, just a cold demand and a mounting fee. You removed the notice, trying to stay calm. But the next day there was another. This time it was not just a notice. Someone had snapped a photo of Max in your backyard and left it printed, stapled to the letter. Multiple visual confirmations received, it said. You felt your stomach twist. Who was watching you? Who was photographing your dog like he was a criminal? The neighbors started acting differently too. Some looked away when you waved. Others whispered as you walked by with Max on his leash. A few crossed the street entirely. You received a friendly reminder email from the HOA the following week. We understand your attachment to the animal, but community safety must come first. Some residents feel threatened. Certain breeds can be unpredictable. Max? Threatening? Max, who lets toddlers tug on his ears and carries tennis balls like treasures in his mouth. You knew this was no longer about the rules. It was about power, prejudice, and fear. The final straw came one morning when you stepped outside and found a bag of dog waste thrown across your porch. It was not from Max. You always cleaned up after him. Someone had done this on purpose. A message. And that same day, an HOA board member casually stopped by your house. He smiled too wide, looked at Max, and said, "It's just a matter of time. You seem like a reasonable person. Don't make this harder than it has to be." You stood there, stunned, as he walked away. Max sat beside you, ears alert, eyes full of trust. He did not understand what was happening. But you did. This was not a neighborhood anymore. It was a battlefield, and now you were done playing defense. They thought they could intimidate you. They thought enough fines, cold stares, and anonymous complaints would break your spirit. But they forgot one thing. You are not the kind of person who gives up on family. And Max, your dog, your friend, was your family. That evening you sat on your back porch as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over your little yard. Max lay by your feet, eyes soft, chest rising with calm trust. You looked at him and made a quiet promise. They do not want you here? Fine. I will give them something they truly cannot ignore. You were done begging, done pleading for permission to live in peace. The plan began taking shape in your mind. First, you pulled out the HOA bylaws, printed every page, highlighted every clause. You read them like scripture. You found the loopholes, the vague phrases, the gray areas they used to control people. And then, you used those same rules against them. You contacted a local attorney, someone who had dealt with HOA disputes before. She confirmed what you suspected. The HOA had no legal right to demand Max's removal unless he posed a real danger or was violating noise or sanitation rules. He had done none of that. Then you reached out to a small group of supportive neighbors, quiet, kind people who had always admired Max. One of them was a retired contractor. Another owned a landscaping business. Together, you drew up a design, a transformation of your backyard, a dog-friendly paradise that followed every HOA rule but pushed every boundary of creativity. No structures above height limits, no noise, no violations, just beauty, purpose, joy. You went to work immediately, ordering supplies, filing the required landscaping paperwork with the HOA. They could not say no. Everything was by the book, you made sure of it. What you were about to build was not just a yard. It was a statement, a message to the HOA, and to anyone who thought silence meant surrender. You picked the wrong dog owner to push around. It began with a single shovel. The dirt in your backyard, once untouched and plain, was soon alive with motion. Contractors marking outlines, supplies arriving on trucks, curious neighbors peeking from behind curtains. Max watched it all, tail wagging, eyes gleaming with wonder. You were not just building a yard. You were building freedom. The first week, the fence went up. Legal height, HOA-approved color, but custom designed with frosted panels etched with paw prints. Decorative, compliant, and impossible to ignore. Then came the agility course, a wooden tunnel painted in pastel blues, a climbing ramp with padded turf, a set of weave poles that lit up at night with soft, solar-powered LEDs. You installed a small water feature, a custom-built dog splash pool with stepping stones and a filter system that exceeded HOA water safety codes, completely permitted, perfectly allowed. Next, a mural appeared on the back wall of your garage. It featured Max standing tall in a field of flowers, with a leash in his mouth and a crown made of bones on his head, painted by a local artist, approved under the HOA's decorative art clause. People began stopping to look. Children leaned through the fence, calling out to Max. Other dog owners started bringing treats. Someone left a handwritten note taped to your mailbox. "Thank you for standing up. This is beautiful." Meanwhile, the HOA was silent. They sent no letters. They filed no fines because they could not. Everything you had done was within the rules, meticulously legal, thoughtfully measured, and brilliantly defiant. You had taken their restrictions and turned them into a stage, a platform where joy, color, and life took center stage. And Max, he ran through his paradise every morning like a king on parade, his tail waving like a banner, his bark ringing out with pride, no longer quiet, no longer afraid. This was no longer just your home. This was a revolution, in dog toys, turf, and pure love. At first, the HOA tried to pretend nothing had happened. They ignored the growing crowd that stopped by your fence each evening. They ignored the smiles exchanged between dog walkers. They ignored the way children laughed and pointed when Max chased butterflies across the lawn. But they could not ignore the photos. One of your neighbors, an amateur photographer, posted a picture of Max mid-leap in front of the backyard mural. The post was simple. "This is what joy looks like." It went viral in the local Facebook group. Then it spread to Reddit. Then the local newspaper picked up the story. HOA tries to ban therapy dog. Homeowner responds with stunning doggy wonderland. Suddenly, people across the city were talking. Letters poured into the HOA office, not from angry residents, but from supporters, from dog lovers, from military veterans with service animals, from parents of autistic children, from people who had been silenced by HOAs for too long. A local news crew showed up unannounced. They interviewed you, standing beside Max in his favorite corner of the yard. You told the truth, calmly, clearly, without drama. "He is not just a dog. He is a part of my healing. They wanted to erase him. I wanted to celebrate him." That clip aired the next morning. By noon, your street was full of parked cars. Neighbors and strangers alike came to see what you had built. Children lined up to pet Max through the fence. A bakery dropped off dog-shaped cookies. Someone even donated a custom doghouse shaped like a castle. And then, the HOA broke their silence. They called for an emergency board meeting. Closed doors, tense faces, whispered arguments. But they had no choice now. Residents were signing a petition. "Protect our pets. Amend the HOA rules." It gained over 300 signatures in 2 days. Pressure mounted. Board members began receiving emails, calls, and threats of removal. One even resigned. What started as a quiet rebellion had turned into a neighborhood movement. You had not just built a backyard. You had lit a fuse, and the fire was spreading. It happened quietly, almost anticlimactically. A plain white envelope in your mailbox, just like the first one. Only this time it carried a very different message. Effective immediately, the HOA will suspend all breed-specific restrictions pending further community vote. All prior citations against your property have been voided. Thank you for your cooperation. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, but it did not matter. You had won. Not just for yourself, not just for Max, but for every silent dog, every quiet homeowner, every neighbor who had once been too afraid to speak up. Max stood beside you that day in the yard, tongue out, tail sweeping the air. Around him were the echoes of laughter, barking, and joy. Your backyard had become more than a sanctuary. It was a symbol. Soon, others in the neighborhood began transforming their spaces. Small agility courses, dog-friendly benches. One neighbor even opened a community dog park with your help. The HOA, sensing the shift in power, adopted a new tone. Less rigid, more cooperative. They now included a pet owner's advisory on the board. You were invited to be part of it. You declined, but you smiled, because your work was already done. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and golden light bathed your mural, you sat on your porch with Max resting his head on your lap. The same porch where, months ago, you held a letter full of threats and fear. Now, it was peace. It was yours. Max looked up at you as if to say, "We did it." And yes, you did. You turned resistance into art. You turned rules into rebellion, and you turned a simple yard into a legacy of love.